let's talk about this controversy with numerous YouTube stars right now. Now, basically, it was actually coming out with a couple different editorials from different outlets and whatnot. There's been, I think, about two or three of them that have been written that kind of explores this idea about how YouTube stars, different YouTube personalities that you can think of that are involved with gaming, like Tobuscus or whatnot, or again, any sort of like big gaming personality that you could think of. I say Tobuscus because he spoke at the E3 conference for Ubisoft one year, but a lot of these YouTube stars are being paid by publishers. In some way, they're receiving monetary profit from them in order to either promote their game or to kind of like show off their game or play a game tested or whatnot. And people have a problem with this. Some people have an issue with that. They think that not only it's like a kind of a conflict of interest or a conflict of ethics, whatnot, but it calls a lot of questions out that really a lot of people want to have answered. So, Austin, let me ask you, what do you think about this, upon hearing it that, a YouTube personality might be paid, by a publisher of a game?
I think it's a situation where, now I can't speak for PewDiePie or people like that, but like Tobuscus specifically, it's a situation where I know he's a big fan of Ubisoft games. He was brought on stage to host an E3 a couple years back. If they're fans of the publisher's output already, and they just want to hark on how great the game is, I mean, as long as there's not an element of disingenuousness, I think it's okay. I'm a huge I'm a huge BioWare fan, but specifically, like, I'm a huge Naughty Dog fan. And I'll say great things about Naughty Dog games regardless. Now, if they want to pay me money, I mean, that just sweetens the pot. But it's not like money would have changed my narrative to begin with. And I think guys like Tobuscus, they're obviously big Assassin's Creed fans. I know he is particularly.
So let me ask you this thing. But before you let me really quickly ask you this. Some people are even saying like maybe they should be upfront and more honest about them receiving money for doing, like, let's say, like a video or something, or checking out the game or hosting something. That being upfront about it should be something that they should take care of, like a little bit of house cleaning. But do you really think that people that are doing this, like again, like you said, like Tobuscus being a fan of Ubisoft games, does he really have to come out like that and really like say that? Like, is it really his responsibility to do so?
I think it's a matter of, I think an element of translucity. I don't even know if that's a word, but we'll go with it.
Transparency.
Transparency, yeah. It's been a long day. So I think an element of transparency is kind of crucial when you're going forward, especially since, I mean, let's be fair, these guys are pretty damn close to journalists. And I think you wouldn't want paid reviews from someone like IGN. But I think the big difference is, though, these guys aren't necessarily dealing with numbers. They don't have a place on Metacritic. It would be nice, it would be honest if this episode of PewDiePie brought to you by, the new Elder Scrolls game. It'd be nice if there was a sense of upfrontness. But unless their entire show is catered towards it, and even then, specifically, if they're changing, like if you had someone who was, just couldn't stand JRPGs, he kind of made a persona about it. I'll put it this way: it would be very strange if Egoraptor started promoting the Call of Duty franchise, and I think that would be very disingenuous. But if he is being backed by Nintendo for a special Zelda episode, and he's honest about it being a Zelda episode, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
But then let me ask you this then, to kind of play devil's advocate or whatnot. Again, you feel like they're kind of along the lines of kind of like journalists. Like, to me, I don't think really a YouTube personality is necessarily a journalist. I think that, there's different standards and different ethics and different approaches and different, procedures for someone that is considered a journalist or looking to be a journalist that they have to follow. And I think that whole question of ethics and morality kind of should be more upfront like that, because again, they have this responsibility of news and informing the actual audience, or specifically of what exactly that they're covering and whether people should actually go out and buy this type of stuff. And it gets into that whole thing. I think when you're more of an actual personality, I think it's a little bit much more open to you. That technically you don't really have the responsibility of having some sort of morality code or some sort of ethical procedure, ethical code
I completely
that's
agree.
responsible to your viewers. Now, some people, again, some people are like that they want to play the morality card and say like, okay, they're very ethical in this and that or whatnot. But does that necessarily mean that they have to do that? Let's keep in mind they're not being employed as a journalist like that. They're just running their own YouTube channel just for their viewers.
Well, I do think it's a situation where, and I think to play devil. Oh, sorry, Gary.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think one significant thing to pay attention to is the fact that journalists, sites like, well, I don't want to be liable for anything, but the big name sites, you look at these review events. Often, I know Bungie sent out like this massive incentive package, really, when they sent out review copies of Halo 3. The Watchdogs were given smartphones at many journalist events. I don't know if I'd necessarily go ahead and say being a journalist automatically comes with a strict set of morals and rules and really just frankly a level of honesty. I think they're journalists in the sense that often they provide mini editorials. I think that's what their podcast programs are. I think that's why PewDiePie, I think, aired world premiere footage at this VGX, the most recent one, of Dying Light. I think they do definitely get kind of early scoops like a site like IGN or GameSpot would. I do think it's a situation where as soon as you become a reviewer and as soon as your mindset is thrown behind a number and that number is thrown into a bigger number factory and you start dealing with Metacritic scores, I think that's a moment where you need to be a little bit more transparent with your funding, with individuals who have talked to you. But I think it's a situation where, unlike a site like IGN, Tobascus can give his opinions. He can do a review, but he can do a review almost in a casual manner, which I don't think websites like IGN are afforded the ability to. And I think the big difference is it's kind of like a friend, not to say, just because you watch someone or listen to them on YouTube, they're friends, but it's having that casual, you should check this. It's an informal review. And I think the difference is, though, I think money, when you have a sense of formality, I think money is a problem. You don't want to buy a review. You don't want to say anyone's bought a review. I think, though, if you are a huge Mass Effect fan personality and you talk about Mass Effect and you start talking about, if you dedicate a whole episode to it, I do think that is not necessarily as, well, frankly, just downright as bad as EA paying IGN versus EA paying PewDiePie. I think it's a situation where you're not necessarily getting free publicity, but you're funding a content provider, an individual content provider, talking more about how much he loves your game. You're not paying him to say great things about your game. You're supporting him to continue that platform that he's already on.
Exactly. Like, I want to say one thing, and then I want to go to Gary about it. Is like, I think that again, when it comes down to like what people are getting confused about, where they're kind of calling the ethical card in there, they're calling about it. It's a question of ethics or whatnot, as far as like what's good journalism or good thing or good practice, as opposed to bad practice when it comes to actually. Was it dealing with actual, was it publishers or developers for the game or whatnot? In the case for a YouTube personally, again, I feel like because they're not really, held to the standard or held to the responsibility of like so much informing people, like what a journalist, that's employed by a company is in some regard, whatnot, that they have a little bit much more free play to do what they want, and it's not really calling foul on them, or really, you can't really call foul on them if they decide to do what they want to do with their own YouTube channel. They might have a lot of subscribers and a lot of viewers or whatnot, and they could decide to use that, to really dictate where they go with their channel or whatnot. But it's not like they have to be held at a specific standard that is universal to everybody like that. Gary, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty much summed up everything I wanted to say, but I think the bottom line is that, if IGN are being paid for a review, I want to know about that. I want them to say this is sponsored by EA, blah blah blah. I know they'll never do that, but that's something you want to know because you go to them for honest and credible
Their
opinions.
responsibility to give you honest reviews and honest info. That's why you want to know about it.
Exactly. And I look at YouTubers as more as like commentators and other fans and people like us basically who just enjoy talking about games and covering games and they have no influence on Metacritic or anything like that. So I don't think they should be held to the same strict standard as a site like IGN, because they're just doing it for the passion. And if companies want to pay them to support them and keep them going, talking about their games and everything, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I'm conflicted with the whole topic because you're right with how like it's with the YouTube people it's a little bit different when it comes to places like IGN. But until I have more of a specific understanding of what's being offered to the YouTube guys, it's hard to say I'm okay with it because unless if it's just promoted, then that's fine. When it comes to the reviews, I personally don't want the publishers to be involved in any fashion, which I know that's too much to ask, especially for sites like IGN and like Polygon and all that. But when if there's a list of things, like say for instance they say we want you to cover this game, and it's possible that they give them a list to say, hey, you can't talk about this, this, and this. If it gets to that point, then I don't like the idea of it. I don't want them to be involved at all, because I know there are situations where they I can't tell you specifically who, but they'll give out hey, review this, we'll pay you this much, but you can't talk about this, this, and that. When it gets to that point, whether it's YouTube or other websites, then I'm not too much a fan of it. But if it's just promoted with gameplay, just talk about it, and they want you to pay for it, then by all means go for it. Because you don't have to say yes to that.
The content definitely has to stay organic. I don't think the publishers should try to get involved in controlling the actual content that's being produced or anything. It needs to stay honest and authentic at the end of the day. And if the content creators can do that while being supported by the publishers, then that's great. But they shouldn't let the money influence their decisions when making the videos and stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's the thing when you accept the money, it's going to vary from person to person, but money does influence you, even in the most subtle of fashions. Going to events and people giving you swag and giving you a lot of attention and giving you money, it'll affect you. Even the best people in the world, it's going to affect you in the slightest. So paying someone to put their content out, it kind of makes you, when it comes down to it, if you see one particular thing and you're trying to decide if you want to talk about it or not, chances are you may lean towards the side where you don't speak on it because of the money that you've got. Some of us aren't like that, but I think most of the people in those positions that are kind of making a living off of it may be like that for the threat that they may not get that money again, if you get what I'm saying.
Well, let me ask this, Charles, because recently you talked about studios dictating what goes in reviews. Is it inherently negative for a studio though to say, spoiler alert, hey, there's a section where you can play Ellie. Don't mention that in reviews. Is that inherently a negative to kind of keep story spoilers out of reviews?
No, that's definitely not what I mean. I'm not talking about
I was just curious.
Keeping things out of the story and spoiling things. Just
What he means technically is saying okay, you can't give this game below a certain score. You can't say that this game is horrible like that. What he mean? That's exactly what he means. When it comes to revealing certain content, like story content or elements and stuff like that, that's fair game. That's just okay, just don't spoil anything for our game. Be honest and about your opinion and stuff, but allow people to still be surprised or check out certain content.
Yeah,
that's what he means.
Well, no, I knew what it meant. I was just kind of curious if that falls into the category. But actually, let me ask this: Mass Effect 3's ending was story content. Does that mean it's kind of?
I get what you're saying. There's gonna be a thin line with some things. That's true, because Mass Effect saying, and actually some of the fault will lie on the person that's accepting this deal, because Mass Effect may have said, hey, review this, we'll pay you this much to review this, but you can't talk about the ending. When you first look at that, you haven't even played it yet, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm not going to talk about the ending because, you know, it's the ending of a fucking game. But you get to it and you realize that there may have been kind of some politics there where they don't want you to talk about how bad it is. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I don't think there's no way to tell that, though, specifically with an ending of a game. I think it much more comes down to, like, if you're talking about, like, an ethical dilemma where, like, the game is, like, really bad and the publisher doesn't want anybody to really kind of, like, reveal that in the early days of the reviews, what they'll do is technically they'll wait until, like, the day of to start sending games and review codes out and stuff like that. That's how they maintain control and whatnot. But, like, when it comes to, like, just sending it out there to different outlets and whatnot, they don't really necessarily do that, and they don't really kind of like I think they don't really kind of violate any lines when they say, okay, don't talk about the ending of our game or don't talk about this certain section of the game just yet. Like, I don't think that's anything wrong with that.
No, I don't think it is either. I was just kind of curious what you guys thought about some things being requested out to be kept out of a review. I'm not saying now if like the character constantly glitches, you know, hey, don't talk about the fact that literally most of the game is invisible walls. I think, yeah, that gets to a point where it's like, whoa.
No, I think at that point,
that would bother me.
I think you just talk about that because that's like saying, okay, that's something visually noticeable. That's part of the review. That's like significant. I don't think that's like any sort of like was a thing that they have really fair say to say like, okay, you can't really talk about this because then that's when the lines start to blur.
Exactly. Like the person.
You got muted there for a second, Charles.
Sorry. The person that's accepting this or whatever needs to look at the language of whatever contract they're going over and make a decision. Is this legitimate, or, you know, is this going to be a bunch of BS and I can't really focus on the things that make this game, that will make it enjoyable for other people? Because to say, hey, don't mention the fact that there's invisible walls, that's a significant thing that people would want to know about, in my opinion, and something that could affect the score. So, you know, it's a big gray area because, you know, you might have that list of things, but you may not have like a thing that says you have to score this. So I might sit there and do a review of a game, and, you know, I'm saying all these positive things, and then it gets a 6 because there's things I couldn't even talk about. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a big gray area.
And I think, you know, I think it also kind of differs on what is requested. You pay me, my video gets 1 million hits each time. You pay me $200 to wear a Mass Effect T-shirt. I don't see a problem with that. Now, if you dictate that I have to bring Mass Effect for some reason up every time,
yeah,
I think
exactly.
Yeah, there are different ways to promote something.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's when it becomes a little bit much more ethically, like, you know, a little bit gray.